The smell that greeted me when I rode through the wrong gate was grain dust and torch smoke, and I thought, good, I have arrived. I had not arrived anywhere near where I meant to go. My name is Marin. My father kept the winter grain stores for 3 settlements along the Caldris border, a modest, necessary man with ink-stained fingers and a ledger he guarded more carefully than coin. When he fell ill that autumn, the task of riding to the way station at Holt's Cross fell to me. To review the harvest tallies with the Lord there, to negotiate the distribution of stores before the passes closed, to bring back his seal on the agreement before the first snow. I had done this kind of work since I was old enough to sit across a table and not flinch when a man raised his voice about bushels. I was practical. I knew grain. I knew contracts. I did not know until I had already dismounted and handed my reins to a stunned-looking stable boy that I had ridden through the gate of Ashfall Keep. Not Holt's Cross. The banners above me were charcoal and bone, the colors of the Ashfall line which had held this border fortress for 4 generations. I did not register them at first. I was tired. The road had been long and the light was going, and the gate had been open, and the torches had been lit as though someone was expected. Someone was expected. It was not me. The steward who met me in the outer yard was a tall, composed man named Eredin who bowed before I could speak. "My lady," he said, "the Alpha King is in the great hall. He will receive you when you are ready." I stood there with my saddlebag over one shoulder and my father's ledger tucked under my arm and thought, this is a mistake. And then I thought, it is late and I am cold, and perhaps I should sort it out inside. This was not wisdom. I see that now. But I was tired and the keep was warm, and though I would not have said so at the time, something in the air of that outer yard made me want to go in. A quality of stillness. The way the torch smoke curled upward and did not scatter. I told myself it was the stone walls holding the heat. I walked inside. Aldrich, I learned his name later, though the whole kingdom knows it. I did not then, because I had spent most of my life with grain ledgers and did not pay close attention to the names of kings, was standing at the far end of the great hall when I entered. He had his back to the fire, which made him difficult to read. He was a large man, broad-shouldered in the way of the northern pack wolves, wearing no armor that evening, only a dark wool tunic and a fur-collared cloak that he had clearly just come in from the cold to remove. He was in the process of setting it across a chair when I walked through the door. He looked up. I looked at him. I would like to say something poetic about that first moment, but the honest truth is that I mostly noticed he was younger than I expected a border-hold alpha to be, and that he was watching me with an expression I could not read, not cold, not warm, just very still, as though he had been interrupted mid-thought and was deciding whether the interruption was worth adjusting to. Then he straightened, and the stillness shifted into something more formal, and he said, "You made good time." "The road was clear," I said, because it had been, and because I was still working out where exactly I was. He gestured toward the long table where a fire was set and cups had been laid. "Please," he said, "sit. We'll speak over the meal." I sat. Because what else do you do when a king pulls out a chair? The meal was good, better than way station food, which is usually bread and some gray substance pretending to be stew. There was roasted fowl and a grain bread with seeds in it that I recognized from the southern fields, and something warm to drink that was not quite wine and not quite cider and was, frankly, excellent. I ate more than I intended to. The Alpha King ate in the way of men who have been outdoors all day, steadily, without ceremony. He was watching me think, I realized, not rudely, more the way a man watches a puzzle he has not yet decided to solve. "You're not what the council described," he said after a while. "I am exactly what I am," I said, which was true if not useful. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. That is either very honest or very diplomatic. "I am not particularly diplomatic," I said. "I am, however, honest." He considered this. Then let's be honest about the grain stores. So we were. I laid out my father's ledger, 40 years of harvest records, tallied by settlement and season, and began to speak about what the border settlements would need to survive the winter and what they could spare for the keep's tax portion. He listened the way a man listens when the information genuinely matters to him. He asked sharp questions. He pushed back on the portion assigned to the Cauldress side correctly. I had padded it, because you always pad the first number in a negotiation, and I conceded with the specific grace of someone who intended to pad it and was not surprised to be caught. He did not smile at winning the point. He simply moved to the next. We were, I thought, a good match in this, two practical people at a table, dealing in honest figures. His wolf was doing something he would not understand until later. I did not know it then, of course. I did not know anything about wolves or pack bonds or the founding bloodline or what it meant when an alpha king's wolf, silent for years, did something it had not done since his mate, his first mate, who died in the fever year, was still alive. What it did was this: it turned toward me. Not his body, not his eyes, something beneath both. Some ancient animal direction, like a compass needle swinging to find north. He felt it and told himself it was the fire. He told himself it was the ale cider. He told himself it was the fact that I was the first guest in the hall since the fever year who was talking to him, as though he was simply a man who needed convincing about bushel weights rather than a king who needed impressing. He told himself many things. His wolf was entirely uninterested in any of them. We spoke past the hour when I should have asked for a room, and past the hour when he should have ended the evening. At some point the fire burned low and neither of us rose to add wood, and the hall grew amber and quiet, and the subject had shifted. I cannot tell you exactly when, from grain stores to the question of whether the eastern trade route would hold if the Cauldress Bridge needed repair in the spring, and from there to the nature of border settlements generally, and from there to something my father had once said about the way a community survives a hard winter. Not by hoarding, but by knowing exactly what it has and sharing precisely enough. Your father sounds like a careful man, he said. He is, I said. He taught me to count everything twice and trust the second number. And do you? He was watching me again with that quality of attention that was not intrusive, only thorough. Trust the second number. Always, I said. The first number is what you hope, the second is what is. He was quiet for a moment. What does the second number say about this evening? I looked at him across the low-burning fire and said, honestly, that it has been a longer conversation than I planned for. And yet you haven't asked for a room. No, I agreed. We looked at each other. The fire crackled. His wolf, that deep compass needle beneath everything, held so still it had become something like weight, not pressure, but presence. The way a great stone is present in a field. You know it's there without looking. I picked up my father's ledger and set it in my bag. I should sleep, I said. There's more to discuss in the morning. He rose when I did old courtesy, the kind that is not performance but habit. Iredin will show you to a room, he said. I thanked him. I followed the steward. I did not sleep well, but I told myself it was the unfamiliar bed. The mistake surfaced at dawn. I had risen early. As I always do, grainkeepers' daughters do not sleep late. There is always something that needs counting, and I had come to the great hall to ask Iredin if there was ink, because I wanted to revise my figures before the second session. Iredin was not in the hall. What was in the hall was the Alpha King's steward second, a brisk woman named Calla, setting out the morning table and stopping mid-task when she saw me. You're, she said. You're not. I am Marin of the Cauldress border settlements, I said. My father is Wren, the grain keeper. I was sent to Holt's Cross to negotiate the winter stores, and I appear to have ridden through our gate instead, Calla said. Yes. There was a pause. The Alpha King believes you are Lady Verath, Calla said carefully. The emissary from the High Council. She was expected yesterday. I am not Lady Vereth, I said. No, Calla agreed. We looked at each other with the shared expression of two people who understand that a situation is both significantly inconvenient and, in the pale morning light, rather unavoidably funny. I felt it rise in me before I could stop it, a short, genuine laugh. The kind that escapes when the absurdity outpaces the embarrassment. Calla's composure cracked briefly, then she recovered. I'll need to inform the Alpha King. Yes, I said, you will. He came into the hall 15 minutes later. He had clearly been told en route because he was not surprised to see me. He was something more careful than surprise. He was reading the situation with those thorough, patient eyes. He had my father's ledger in his hand, which Calla must have shown him. The cover stamped with the grain-keeper's mark, a simple scalan sheaf, nothing of noble lineage about it. He set the ledger on the table between us. I did not reach for it. Marin of the Caldrus Grain Stores, he said. Yes. Not Lady Vereth of the High Council. Correct. He was quiet for a moment. You knew before this morning. It was not a question, but I answered it. I suspected by the banners. I confirmed it by the second hour of our conversation when you mentioned the council's deliberation schedule. Lady Vereth would have been party to it. I was not. And you said nothing. I was going to, I said, and then it was late, and the conversation was, I paused, looking for a word that was honest without being excessive. Useful, I said. The grain agreement is a genuine agreement. What we negotiated is real, regardless of who I am. He looked at me. It is, he said. That's what's strange. I waited. A council emissary would have padded the figures more cleverly, he said, and would not have told me about trusting the second number. No, I agreed. I imagined she would not. He picked up the ledger and held it out to me. When I took it, his fingers did not release it immediately. Not a grip, simply a delay, as though his hand had not quite caught up with his intention. Then he released it. I'll have your horse made ready, he said. And he turned toward the door. What happened next I cannot fully explain, and I am the one who lived it. He turned toward the door. He did not reach it. It was not a physical thing, no wall, no bar, no hand on his arm. It was something else. The best way I can describe it, he had been walking with a certain weight his whole adult life, the weight of a man who carries grief the way stone carries cold, absorbing it so thoroughly that it becomes simply the nature of the thing. He had walked under that weight toward that door, and between one step and the next, the weight changed. Not gone, but different, as though something had taken up a position between him and the door, not blocking him exactly, but making the step cost more than it should. A cost he could not name, a resistance that was not in the stones. He stopped. His hand was near the door frame. He did not touch it. Later, when there were no longer secrets between us, he told me what it had been. He told me that in the 12 years since Alara died, his wolf had been present in the way a cold river is present in winter. You know it is there beneath the ice, but it does not move. It had not surged toward a woman, had not expressed preference or pull, had not turned its ancient attention toward anything that breathed and had a name. He had stopped expecting it to. Between him and the door, his wolf had stood. Not metaphorically, not as a feeling. It had positioned itself, some interior version of itself, older than his body, older than his grief, and it had stopped moving, roots deep. The way a great tree stands in a storm, not fighting the wind, simply declining to move. He stood in the corridor with his hand near the door frame, and understood, in a way that bypassed all argument, that something ancient had made a decision. He did not turn around immediately. He stood there long enough that Eredin, passing at the far end of the corridor, slowed his steps and looked at him with the particular careful expression of a man who has served a king long enough to recognize when the king is hearing something that no one else in the room can hear. Then he came back. I was still at the table with my father's ledger when he returned. I had been retallying the figures, because I had nothing else to do, and counting calms me the way other people are calmed by music or prayer. When I heard his step, I looked up. He said, "Stay." Not a command. I want to be precise about this because it matters. It was the way you say a word when you have not decided to say it, but it has come out of you anyway. The way truth does sometimes, before the mind has finished forming it. "Stay," he said. "One more day. There are grain counts for the eastern settlements I have not yet reviewed, and your knowledge of the border stores is—" He paused. "Useful," he said, using my word back at me. I looked at him standing there in the morning hall, this large, careful man whose wolf I did not yet know about and whose grief I had not yet learned the shape of, and I thought about Holt's Cross, where the harvest lord would have been easy and unmemorable, and I would have come home with a sealed contract and no sense of having been, in any particular way, in the presence of something worth counting twice. "One more day," I said. He nodded. He sat back down across the table. And neither of us mentioned the door. The day was long in the way that days are long when you are not looking at them. We went through the Eastern Settlement records. We argued about the distribution weight for the Mountain Pass holdings, which had underreported their stores 3 years running. I caught it in the figures. He had suspected it but lacked the Caldress side data to confirm. We ate at midday without ceremony, at the same work table, surrounded by open ledgers. He told me, at some point in the afternoon, about the fever year. Not in the way people tell painful things, with ceremony and preparation, but the way they slip into them when they are occupied with something else, when the hands are busy and the guard is down. He told me that his pack had lost 14 wolves in that season, including 3 of the 4 who carried the founding bloodline, and that Alara had been one of them. He said it the way you say a thing you have said many times, which does not mean it does not hurt, only that the shape of the hurt is known. "I stopped expecting the wolf to recover," he said. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the eastern map, tracing the pass route with one finger. "Some do not." "And yet it did something yesterday," I said. He looked up sharply. "I do not know what," I said honestly. "I only know that something in this keep decided I should stay before I had made any decision at all." He was very still. "You felt it." "Something," I said. "I thought it was the warmth, or the ale cider. It was quite good." He looked at me for a long moment, and then, the first real one, he laughed. Not large, quiet, private, as though it had been surprised out of him, as though he had not expected to find that particular muscle still in working order. I felt it settle somewhere in my chest, that laugh. I told myself it was satisfaction at a well-negotiated grain record. It was Elder Bryn who named it. She was the keep's warden, not in rank but in years. She had served Ashfall for 60 of them, first under Aldrich's grandfather, and she moved through the stone corridors with the quiet authority of someone who has outlasted everyone else's certainty. She found me in the outer yard at dusk, where I had gone to check on my horse and clear my head, and she stood beside me at the fence rail and looked at the animal with the expression of someone who has not come to look at a horse. "You felt the threshold sign," she said. I considered denying it, and then I remembered that I was the daughter of a man who had spent 40 years trusting the second number. "I felt something," I said. "I did not know its name." "It has several names," Bryn said. "In my grandmother's time it was called the Wolf's Door. The idea is that the pack bond, the ancient one, the founding one, knows its own. It finds the mate not when the king looks for one, but when the bond itself decides the door should open." She paused. "It does not require his wolf to speak. It does not require a mark or a public ceremony or any witness but itself. It stands. That is all. It stands, and it will not be moved." I was quiet for a moment, watching my horse shift its weight contentedly in the evening air. "He should know," I said. "He does," Bryn said. "He has known since the corridor this morning. He simply has not yet said it aloud, which is a separate and considerably more difficult task for a man who has carried grief for 12 years. And the council emissary. I said, Lady Verath, she is still expected. She arrived at Holt's Cross this afternoon, Bryn said. She'll keep. She looked at me. The alliance match is another matter. You will want to know about that. I did. The alliance match, this I learned from Bryn that evening, and from Aldrich himself the following morning, when the conversation was finally direct, was with Lady Thessaly of the Iron Fens, a daughter of the western border house whose lands shared a resource route with Ashfall. The match was practical. 2 border holdings, a shared road, a political alignment that would benefit both houses. Thessaly was by all accounts a composed, capable woman who had agreed to the match with the same practicality I recognized in myself, because it was useful, and because her alternative at 32 was to stay in the Iron Fens indefinitely, which she had no strong objection to, but which offered its own monotony. What Bryn told me, which I confirmed later, Thessaly had been corresponding for some months with Ashfall's head falconer, a quiet, keen-eyed man named Corin who had accompanied the last treaty delegation to the Iron Fens and had apparently made a lasting impression. The letters were not secret exactly. They were simply private. Thessaly had not told anyone because the match with Aldrich was already arranged, and she was too practical to complicate what was already set. The Wolf's door opening was, from a certain angle, a gift to Thessaly as much as to anyone. I did not think about it in these terms that evening. What I thought about was the second number, and what it showed, and whether I was the kind of woman who trusted it when it showed something she had not expected. I was in the keep's small library when Aldrich found me. I had borrowed a candle and was rereading the grain records from the fever year, not from duty, but because I wanted to understand the shape of the thing he had lived through, the arithmetic of loss, the specific count of what had been taken. He came and sat across from me without asking, which by then was simply what we did. Bryn spoke to you, he said. Yes. And you know about Thessaly? Yes. He was quiet. I will speak to her. The match should not have been made in the way it was made by councils who thought the route sharing required a marriage to hold it. It does not. A road treaty does not require a wife. I should have said so before. I did not because, he paused, because I had stopped caring what shape the future took. It seemed one thing as good as another. And now, I said. He looked at me across the candle-lit table, and now it does not seem that way. I set down the fever year record. I looked back at him. I am a grain-keeper's daughter, I said. I have no rank, no house seal, no political alliance value. I am, from the perspective of a border hold negotiation, a poor trade. Yes, he said. I am also practical, and reasonably good with figures, and I do not flinch when a man raises his voice about bushels. I know, he said. And your wolf will not move. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said, it will not. I thought about the second number. I thought about my father's ledger, and the way the right account tells you not what you hope, but what is. I thought about riding through a gate I had not meant to enter and finding a great hall lit as though for someone expected, and a man who listened to grain figures as though they mattered, which they did, and who laughed quietly when surprised, which was rare enough to be worth counting. Ask me, I said. He looked at me. Do not claim, I said. Ask. He understood the difference immediately. I could see it, and for a moment something shifted in his face, something that had been very carefully held for a long time. He set his hands on the table, palms up, the way you set out a ledger for review, everything visible, nothing concealed. Marin, he said, will you stay? I thought about it, not long. The second number was already clear. I will review the figures, I said. The border store's situation will not manage itself. It was not yes exactly, but it was not a grain-keeper's answer, and we both knew it. The morning he sent word to Thessaly, I sat in the outer yard and watched the ravens go. Aldrich composed the letter himself, not a dismissal but a release, honest and courteous, naming the changed circumstance without dramatics. He mentioned the root treaty that would hold the road alliance without requiring a marriage. He did not mention me, which I thought showed a fine instinct, because the news that the Alpha King's wolf had chosen a grain-keeper's daughter was the kind of thing that should arrive in its own time, not bundled with a rejection. Thessaly's reply came back in 3 days. It was brief and notably warm. She thanked him for the root treaty language, which she found better than the original, and noted that the Iron Fens was expecting a visit from Ashfall's falconer in the spring. She wished him well. Aldrich read it twice, and then passed it to me without a word. I read it and said, "She sounds relieved." "She is," he said. "She was the only one who wasn't allowed to say so." He sounded for a moment like a man who had not considered that other people were also managing the weight of things they hadn't chosen. I watched the change move through his face, the recognition of it, and thought that this was the thing grief did to even careful people. It turned the attention inward so thoroughly that you forgot others were carrying their own. "That's the difficulty with duty," I said. "Everyone performs it so well that no one knows who wants to be released." He looked at me. "Did you ever perform a duty you wanted to be released from?" I thought of the long road to Holt's Cross, which I had taken without complaint every autumn for 4 years since I was old enough to ride alone, in rain and clear weather, because my father needed it done and I was capable and someone had to. "The road to Holt's Cross," I said, "every autumn. And this year you missed the gate." "This year I missed the gate," I said. We sat with that for a moment, the particular quality of a mistake that turns out to be a correction, the wrong door that opens into the right room. His wolf was quiet in the way that full things are quiet, not absence, completion. The way a full granary is quiet, everything accounted for. There were things that came after, the council's surprise, which was considerable, the formal presentation, which I found unnecessary but endured, Bryn's satisfied expression throughout the ceremony, which I found the most satisfying part, the letter from my father, who had received the news with first disbelief, and then a deep, particular pleasure of a man who has spent his life trusting the second number and raised a daughter to do the same. He wrote, "The second number showed it, did it not?" It had. But what I remember from all of it, more than the ceremony and the council and the ravens going and the letter, is a morning in the Ashfall library, 2 candles burning low, the Eastern settlement map spread between us, and the Alpha King's wolf standing somewhere beneath the stone and not moving, quiet and absolute as a full account, the kind that doesn't need a second tally because the first one is true. I still carry my father's ledger. It is in my saddlebag still, moved now to the tack room of Ashfall Keep, and the cover it wears bears 2 marks, the grainkeeper's scale and sheaf, and beside it new, pressed in Aldrich's seal ring the morning I said yes. 2 marks both true. The second number, as it always is, was the one to trust.